Even while wearing dignity, Dell Curry was escorted out of the hotel like any common intruder. What the cameras captured that night was not just an injustice, it was the trigger. No one could have predicted that a simple no at the reception would unleash a social earthquake. Within 24 hours, the world would witness how a moment of humiliation would transform into something extraordinary. The Manhattan sky was beginning to darken when Dell Curry walked through the revolving doors of the Waikiki Pinnacle Hotel. Raindrops still glistened on his navy blue sports coat, a comfortable piece he had chosen for the 5-hour flight from Charlotte. After decades as a professional player and now as a respected NBA commentator, Dell knew how to balance comfort and presentation. But at that moment, after hours of travel, he looked like just a tired 59-year-old man. The Pinnacle lobby gleamed with Italian marble and crystal chandeliers that poured golden light over the well-dressed guests, who circulated with the nonchalance of those who belonged in that environment. Dell dragged his wheeled suitcase across the polished floor, leaving an almost imperceptible wet trail. His shoulders ached, and he longed for a hot bath before resting for the next day's charity event, a fundraiser organized by his son Steph's foundation for basketball programs in underserved communities. "May I help you, sir?" The receptionist's voice, Thomas Whitfield, had that rehearsed formality of luxury hotels, but his blue eyes examined Dell with a curiosity that bordered on suspicion. "Good evening. I have a reservation under the name Dell Curry." He smiled politely, reaching for his phone to show the confirmation email. Thomas typed something into the computer, his fingers moving with deliberate slowness. "I don't see any reservation under that name, sir." Dell frowned. There must be some mistake. "My son's foundation team confirmed it 3 days ago." He turned his cell phone screen toward Thomas. "Here's the reservation number." The receptionist barely glanced at the phone. "I understand that you believe you have a reservation, but it's not showing in our system. The Pinnacle is completely booked for a special event this weekend." A well-dressed couple passed by the counter at that moment, being immediately greeted with smiles and, "Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Hoffman." Dell noticed the instant change in Thomas's tone. "The special event is precisely what brings me here," Dell explained, maintaining the calm he had developed in years of pressure on the courts. "It's the Curry Foundation Benefit Gala. My son is Steph Curry." Something changed in Thomas's face. Not recognition, but a slight hardening. "Sir, anyone could walk in here claiming to be related to a celebrity." Dell took a deep breath. In his almost 60 years as a black man in America, he knew that look well. That tone. It was the same one he had faced decades ago when trying to enter restaurants after games, even when he was already an NBA star. "I can show you my identification," Dell offered, opening his wallet to reveal his North Carolina driver's license. "That doesn't prove your connection to the event," Thomas replied, now with a firmer tone. He made a discreet gesture to one of the security guards in the lobby, who began to approach. "Perhaps you're confusing our hotel with another." A young black employee, with a badge identifying him as Marcus Johnson Concierge, observed the scene from across the counter, his face a mask of professionalism that barely concealed his discomfort. "There's no confusion," Dell insisted, his voice remaining controlled but firm. "Call Jessie Torres, the event coordinator. She'll confirm my identity and reservation." Thomas crossed his arms. "Sir, I'm not going to disturb our event organizers at this hour of the night. I suggest you look for another hotel." At that moment, a small group of people emerged from the hotel bar. One of them, a middle-aged man in a deep, expensive blazer, looked toward the counter, and his eyes widened. Wait a minute. You're Dell Curry, aren't you? The man approached enthusiastically. Man, I watched all your games for the Hornets. My kids are huge fans of your son. Dell nodded politely, grateful for the recognition, but embarrassed by the situation. Yes, that's me. The man turned to Thomas. What's the problem here? Thomas seemed momentarily disconcerted. We're just clarifying a misunderstanding about reservations. Misunderstanding? The man laughed. This is Dell Curry, father of the greatest shooter in NBA history. Other guests began to notice the commotion, some recognizing Dell and pulling out their phones. Thomas, looking increasingly uncomfortable, lowered his voice. Mr. Curry, let's resolve this discreetly. Please accompany our security to a more private area. Dell noticed the change in approach, but the damage was already done. There's no need for privacy. Either I have a reservation, or I don't. The security guard, a burly man in a black suit, positioned himself beside Dell. Sir, let's talk in another location. This is ridiculous, the fan protested. You know who he is? Thomas shot a hard look at the guest. Sir, this is a hotel matter. Please don't interfere. Dell, realizing the situation was getting out of control, raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. It's all right. I'll look for another hotel. Dell, this isn't right, the fan insisted, now discreetly filming with his cell phone. It really isn't, Dell agreed, his dignity intact despite the growing humiliation. Turning to Thomas, he said calmly, You're going to regret this tomorrow. It wasn't a threat, but a prediction. As Dell was being escorted out, Marcus, the young concierge, quickly checked the system and clearly saw Dell Curry's reservation marked as VIP for the next day's event. His eyes met Dell's for a brief moment, a silent look of apology and shared indignation. Outside, the Manhattan, rain had intensified. Dell Curry adjusted his coat collar and picked up his phone. He made just one call. Steph, it's me. We have a problem. Meanwhile, inside the hotel, security cameras had captured the entire incident, and the amateur video from the fan was already being sent to people who would eventually share it with the world. The sun had barely risen over the Manhattan horizon when the name Dell Curry was already dominating social media trends. The video of his expulsion from the IOE2 Pinnacle Hotel, captured by the fan and supplemented by security camera footage leaked by an anonymous employee, had spread like wildfire during the early morning hours. At 7:43 in the morning, Thomas Whitfield's cell phone vibrated violently on his nightstand. The Pinnacle's front desk manager was still wrapped in the 1,000 thread count Egyptian sheets of his bed when he answered the call from his direct supervisor. Thomas, you need to come immediately. We have a crisis on our hands. He arrived at the hotel 40 minutes later to find the lobby, normally a sanctuary of discreet elegance, transformed into a crisis management command center. The public relations director was on the phone, her normally impassive expression replaced by a look of contained panic. The general manager, Richard Hayes, a man who rarely displayed any emotion beyond polite satisfaction, paced back and forth with his sleeves rolled up. 23 million views, Thomas, in just a few hours. Hayes's voice was controlled, but sharp as a razor. Do you have any idea what you've done? Thomas felt his stomach sink as he watched the video for the first time. The footage clearly showed his barely disguised expression of contempt, Dell Curry's visible discomfort, and the humiliating escort out of the hotel. The hashtag, Dell Curry deserves respect, was already among the most discussed topics globally. I didn't know who he was, Thomas murmured, an excuse that sounded hollow even to his own ears. That's exactly the problem, Hayes shot back. You didn't think he could be who he said he was because of his appearance. And now we have this. He spun his tablet screen to show a recent post by Steph Curry, shared millions of times in minutes. I grew up watching my father face situations like this. A man who served as a role model for generations of athletes. Treated like an intruder because of the color of his skin. No fame or achievement protects us from this. I am deeply disappointed with the Pinnacle Hotel and will not participate in the charity event scheduled for today. Some spaces continue to tell us we don't belong in them, no matter our accomplishments. It's time to create our own spaces. The message was accompanied by a photo of Dell and Steph together, smiling in matching uniforms. All the players invited to the event have canceled their participation, Hayes continued. We're receiving massive reservation cancellations. Nike just informed us they're ending their corporate event partnership. Thomas sat heavily. Can I speak with him? Explain that it was a misunderstanding? Hayes let out a humorless laugh. Misunderstanding? The hotel cameras show that his reservation appeared clearly on your screen. You chose to ignore it. Across the lobby, Marcus Johnson watched the scene with a mixture of emotions. He had spent the entire night awake, torn between loyalty to the job he had fought so hard to get and indignation over what he had witnessed. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his older sister, Tanya, a university professor and activist. Saw the video from the Pinnacle. Were you working last night? Do you know the truth? Marcus looked at Thomas, now hunched in an armchair while hotel executives discussed damage control strategies. He thought about all the small indignities he himself had silently endured during his 2 years there. Guests who asked for another employee to serve them. Veiled suspicions about his competence. Comments about how he was articulate. His thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before responding. Yes, I was there, and it's worse than it looks in the video. Meanwhile, at a more modest hotel a few blocks away, Dell Curry was having coffee with his son. Steph, normally known for his easy smile and relaxed disposition, had a serious expression he rarely displayed off the courts. This is getting bigger than we expected, Dad, Steph said, scrolling through his phone. Players from all leagues are speaking out. LeBron just posted a video about it. Dell nodded, his expression contemplative. I didn't want you to cancel the event. The kids were counting on it. The kids need to learn that there are times when you need to take a stand, Steph replied. Besides, we're already reorganizing. Damian and Clay suggested we move it to the community center in the Bronx. It'll be even more meaningful now. Dell smiled slightly. Your grandfather would be proud of you. He always said that the true measure of a man is how he responds to injustice. Steph's phone rang again. It's the board of directors from the Pinnacle. 4th call in 2 hours. Are you going to answer? Steph shook his head. Not yet. First, I want to see what they do publicly. He paused. What do you want to do about this, Dad? Dell looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. I want this to mean something beyond just another viral video of passing outrage. If we're going to make this a moment of attention, let it be for real change. Back at the Pinnacle, the crisis meeting had moved to the main conference room. The Human Resources Director, a black woman named Patricia Wells, spoke with a tranquility that contrasted with the general panic. This is not an isolated incident, she stated. It's the manifestation of a systemic problem that many of us have tried to point out for years. Thomas Whitfield felt all eyes turned to him, not just as the one responsible for the incident, but as the symbol of something larger. His phone vibrated with a message from his college daughter, Amber. "Dad, they're sharing the video on campus. Is that you in it? Please tell me it's not." Meanwhile, outside the hotel, the first protesters were beginning to gather with signs. Among them was Tanya Johnson, Marcus's sister, leading a group of students. And a few blocks away, at a community center in the Bronx, volunteers rushed to hastily reorganize what would now become a much larger event than originally planned. The digital storm that had begun with a video was just beginning to show its true power. ESPN headquarters in Bristol, Connecticut, didn't usually have so much activity at 10 in the morning on a Saturday, but this wasn't a common Saturday. In the main studio, lights were adjusted and microphones tested urgently while producers ran back and forth. Dell Curry, wearing an impeccably aligned navy blue suit, very different from the casual clothes of the previous night, waited calmly, his eyes reflecting decades of experience dealing with pressure. "We're on air in 30 seconds, announced the director. The interviewer, Sage Steele, adjusted her headphones and offered a supportive smile to Dell. "Ready?" Dell nodded, his serene countenance hiding the inner turmoil. The cameras began to roll. Today we're with Dell Curry, former NBA player and father of Steph Curry, to talk about the incident that happened last night at the Pinnacle Hotel in Manhattan, Sage began. "Dell, thank you for being with us in this difficult moment." "Thank you for having me, Sage. Can you tell us, in your own words, what happened yesterday?" Dell adjusted himself slightly in the chair. "I arrived at the hotel after a long day of travel. I was tired, dressed casually. When I tried to check in, I was treated with immediate suspicion. Even after showing my identification and reservation confirmation, I was escorted out as if I were a threat. In the video circulating online, you tell the manager, 'You're going to regret this tomorrow.' What was going through your mind at that moment?" Dell's eyes fixed directly on the camera. "It wasn't a threat, Sage. It was the certainty that once the truth came out, it would be clear that a mistake had been made. But more important than that," he paused, carefully choosing his words, "I thought about all the black men who go through similar situations every day and don't have a famous son or a platform to be heard afterward." In Manhattan, Thomas Whitfield watched the live interview in his apartment, a forgotten cup of coffee cooling beside him. His wife, Caroline, sitting silently on the sofa, watched him with a mixture of concern and disappointment. "I'm not racist," Thomas murmured, almost to himself. Caroline stared at him. "Then why did you treat him that way?" "I was just following security protocols." "No," she replied firmly. "You saw a casually dressed black man and decided he didn't belong in that place. Everyone can see that in the video, Thomas." On screen, Dell continued, "During my years in the NBA, I got used to being recognized. But when I take off the uniform, when I'm not beside my famous son, I'm just another middle-aged black man facing the same assumptions and prejudices I've faced my entire life." The words hit Thomas like a punch to the stomach. For the first time, he began to see the situation through a different lens. Meanwhile, at the Pinnacle Hotel, Marcus Johnson entered the conference room where the crisis management team continued to meet. His presence, unsolicited, caused surprise. "Marcus," General Manager Hayes began, "we appreciate your initiative, but we're in the middle of—" "I'm here because I need to speak," Marcus interrupted, his voice firmer than it had ever been in that environment. "What happened to Mr. Curry was not an isolated incident." A heavy silence took over the room. "Continue," Patricia Wells from Human Resources encouraged, ignoring Hayes's warning look. "In the 2 years I've worked here, I've witnessed at least 17 similar incidents, Marcus continued, pulling a small notebook from his pocket. I dated and documented each one of them. Black and Latino guests being questioned about their presence in the lobby. Room service requests attended with delay when they came from certain rooms. Staff members being reprimanded for conversing in Spanish during breaks. Hayes seemed about to interrupt, but Patricia raised her hand. Let him finish. Last night, I clearly saw Mr. Curry's reservation in the system. Thomas saw it too. It was marked as VIP. Marcus took a deep breath. I'm risking my job by saying this, but I can't stay silent anymore. Back at the ESPN studio, Dell was answering Sage's final question. What do you hope will result from all this, Dell? He reflected for a moment. I hope this is an opportunity for an honest conversation. I don't want the manager who expelled me to lose his job. I want him to understand. I want the hotel to examine its practices. And most importantly, I want people watching at home to reflect on the judgments they make every day based solely on someone's appearance. In his apartment, Thomas turned off the television and picked up his phone. There were dozens of unread messages, including several from his daughter Amber. He opened the most recent one. Dad, we're studying implicit bias in college. Please watch this lecture I'm sending you. I know you're a good person, but we all have things to learn. I love you. Thomas felt a lump in his throat as he clicked on the link. At the Bronx Community Center, the reorganized charity event was in full swing. Steph Curry, surrounded by enthusiastic children, spoke into the microphone. Sometimes, the most important lessons happen off the courts. Today, my father taught us about dignity and how to transform a moment of injustice into an opportunity for growth. I'm prouder of him today than of any shot I've ever made. Social media now bubbled with a new hashtag, Chuck Voices Rising, inspired by Dell's words during the interview. Luxury hotel employees across the country began sharing their own experiences, creating a spontaneous movement for change. At the end of that afternoon, the Pinnacle Hotel issued an official statement announcing Thomas Whitfield's temporary suspension, a complete investigation into discriminatory practices, and a public apology to Dell Curry. The statement, however, sounded formulaic and corporate, evidently written by lawyers concerned about possible lawsuits. What no one knew was that at that same moment, Thomas Whitfield was sitting in his living room, watching a lecture on implicit bias, with silent tears streaming down his face as a painful understanding began to awaken within him. And at another Manhattan hotel, Dell Curry received a surprising call from Marcus Johnson, who identified himself as the employee who had been present the previous night. Mr. Curry, I would like to testify, if it helps. Dell smiled. Sometimes, son, the most difficult and most necessary thing is exactly that. Raising your voice when it would be easier to remain silent. 3 weeks after the incident, a light rain fell over Manhattan when Dell Curry returned to the Pinnacle Hotel. This time, however, he didn't enter through the front revolving door, but through a side entrance that led directly to the Greenwich Conference Room, where an unusual meeting was about to begin. The room, normally used for corporate negotiations and sales presentations, had been reorganized. A round table occupied the center, symbolizing the absence of hierarchy. Around it, chairs awaited the participants of what the organizers called a restorative justice circle, a concept that few of the hotel executives had heard of before that week. Dell was the first to arrive, accompanied by his son Steph and by Dr. Michelle Bennett, a specialist in conflict resolution and racial justice who had volunteered to mediate the meeting. Soon after, Richard Hayes, the hotel's general manager, Patricia Wells from Human Resources, and 2 members of the hotel chain's board of directors who had flown from Chicago, especially for the occasion, entered. The last to enter was Thomas Whitfield. 3 weeks had left visible marks on his face, deep, dark circles and the expression of someone carrying an invisible weight. He hesitated momentarily upon seeing Dell, but then straightened his shoulders and walked to the table. "Thank you all for being here," Dr. Bennett began. "This is not a courtroom, nor a negotiation. It's a space for truth, understanding, and, we hope, healing and transformation." She explained the rules. Each person would speak without interruptions, focusing on their personal experience and not on accusations. The objective was not punishment, but genuine understanding and real change. Dell was the first to speak, describing not just the incident itself, but the accumulated weight of a lifetime of similar moments. At 13, I was followed in a department store. At 19, I had guns pointed at me by police while returning from a night practice in college. At 27, even as a professional player, I saw people cross the street when I walked at night. At 45, I was mistaken for a security guard at an event where I was the main speaker. His voice remained calm, but carried decades of hard-won dignity. What happened at this hotel was just one link in a long chain of experiences that shape how I navigate the world. When it was Thomas's turn, the silence in the room was palpable. He looked directly at Dell for the first time. "In the past weeks, I have relived that night repeatedly," he began, his voice trembling. "Initially, I told myself I was just following protocols, doing my job. But then I watched the video. I saw my expression, heard my tone, and I finally saw what everyone else saw." He took a deep breath. "Mr. Curry, when you entered the hotel, I made instant judgments based solely on your appearance. It wasn't protocol that made me ignore your reservation in the system. It was my prejudice, a prejudice I denied possessing." Thomas then shared how the difficult conversations with his daughter, the educational videos she had shared, and his own painful reflection led him to an inescapable conclusion. "I carry prejudices I didn't even know I had. I harmed people without realizing what I was doing. And for that, I offer not just my apologies, but my commitment to do the internal work necessary to change." Steph Curry, who had remained in observant silence until then, leaned forward. "I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Whitfield. Many would have hidden behind corporate excuses or denials. Recognizing the problem is the first step to solving it." Hayes, the general manager, intervened. "We want to make it clear that the hotel assumes total institutional responsibility. Mr. Whitfield's behavior didn't happen in a vacuum, but in an environment that allowed such attitudes to prosper." That's when Dell surprised everyone. "What happened to me has already received more attention than thousands of similar incidents that occur every day with people who don't have my platform," he said. "The question now is, what will we do with this attention?" Dr. Bennett smiled, recognizing the cue for the next phase of the meeting. "That's exactly why the Curry Foundation asked us to present a proposal." Steph, then, revealed the plan they had developed: a comprehensive anti-racism training program for the entire hotel chain, development of inclusive policies supervised by diversity experts, and a scholarship program for young people from underrepresented communities interested in careers in the hotel industry. "But we have one non-negotiable condition," Dell added. "We want Thomas Whitfield to be part of the implementation team." A murmur of surprise went through the room. Thomas looked at Dell with absolute perplexity. "Mr. Curry, I was the one who caused all this. Why would you want me involved?" Dell smiled for the first time that morning. Because you did something that few do when confronted with their prejudices. You recognized, took responsibility, and demonstrated willingness to change. That journey you began? Many people and institutions need to start it. Your experience will be valuable. 6 months later, the Pinnacle Hotel lobby was transformed, not just by seasonal decoration, but by less visible and deeper changes. Marcus Johnson, now wearing a badge that identified him as Director of Diversity and Inclusion, was conducting a training session for new employees. Beside him, surprisingly, was Thomas Whitfield. "What you're learning today," Thomas explained to the diverse group of new hires, "are lessons I learned the hard way. Our prejudices don't define who we are, but our willingness to recognize and combat them does." Behind the scenes, the change was reflected in concrete numbers. A 43% increase in diversity of new hires, a drastic reduction in discrimination complaints, and a scholarship program that had already benefited 17 young people from underserved communities. And then, exactly 1 year after the original incident, Dell Curry entered again through the revolving doors of the Pinnacle Hotel. This time, however, he was greeted by Marcus and a diverse team that awaited him with genuine respect. "Welcome back, Mr. Curry," Marcus said with a warm smile. "Your son has already arrived and is waiting in the event hall." As he walked through the lobby toward the hall where the first annual conference on inclusion in the hotel industry was about to begin, Dell passed by a group of employees in training. Among them, he noticed a nervous young black man adjusting his newly acquired uniform. "First day?" Dell asked with an encouraging smile. "Yes, sir," the young man replied. "I'm a little nervous." "You'll do well," Dell assured him. "This place is not the same as it was a year ago." In the event hall, Steph Curry was adjusting the microphone on stage when he saw his father enter. With a smile, he made a discreet signal to the back row, where Thomas Whitfield was seated, now a full-time educator in the Foundation's program. Dell went up on stage to join his son, looking at the diverse audience of hotel executives, community activists, and program scholarship recipients. "A year ago," he began, "I was expelled from this same hotel. Today, I'm here to inaugurate a program that has already begun to transform not just this establishment, but an entire industry." He paused, his eyes meeting Thomas's in the audience. Sometimes, the most painful moments of our lives can become catalysts for the most significant changes, not just for ourselves, but for entire communities. That's how we transform pain into purpose, conflict into progress. In the back row, Thomas Whitfield listened attentively, his notebook open to take notes. Beside him was his daughter Amber, now an intern in the hotel's diversity program, her face reflecting pride in her father's transformation journey. And in the front rows, Marcus Johnson observed everything with the satisfaction of someone who knew that his decision to raise his voice had helped unleash a wave of changes that would continue far beyond that moment. As Dell concluded his speech, an employee discreetly handed Steph an envelope. He opened it, quickly read its contents, and smiled before passing the note to his father. It was a confirmation. 3 other major hotel chains had just joined the initiative. What had begun as a moment of humiliation had transformed into a movement of genuine change. And for Dell Curry, that was the true victory, greater than any score he had ever witnessed on the courts. True transformation, he concluded, doesn't happen overnight. It happens one difficult conversation at a time, one modified policy at a time, one opened mind at a time. And today, in this room, I see hundreds of change agents ready to continue this journey. The audience rose in a standing ovation, not just applauding Dell and Steph, but celebrating the possibility of a future where such incidents would become increasingly rare. Not because they would be hidden, but because the hard work of transformation would finally be bearing fruit.